the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to our Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. It's fun to be back in our grill room. Get to look out these beautiful windows. Where else can you see a race course right outside the windows of your luncheon environment? Many of us who've been sailing all our lives remember the early 70s when a new small boat took over the scene. It grew in popularity like it was a hot stock, and some of the folks in our Bay Area community had a lot to do with that, including the recently recognized Don Trask. But our speakers today also had something to do with it, and were around at the very beginning. Chris Boome first sailed in a sailboat of any kind in his dad's Mercury in Palo Alto when he was 8 or 9 years old, and he remembers holding onto the mast with his sister, being quite certain that the boat was going to heel over and flip and he was going to die. But he endured all those things, got in El Toro, and began sailing, and later on in 1971 got a call from Don Trask, who said, "Come on over to Alameda, I've got something I want you to try." And so he came over and had his first sample of a laser. His co-presenter, Al Sargent, first started sailing with his folks in their Catalina 27, and at one time when they're going up to Tinsley in the Catalina 27, his dad's tired, and he says, "Okay, I want you to steer, Al. Just aim the boat toward that tree across the levee over there." And so Al, at 6 years of age, is steering the Catalina 27. Mom and Dad are safely in their bunks below, going to sleeping. And his mother wakes up for some reason. She comes up and she sees her husband laying next to her asleep, and the boat is still sailing. And she yells at her husband, "Wait, who's steering the boat?" And he says, "Al's steering the boat." She thinks, "Al, he's only 6. She jumps up and looks around and sees that they haven't hit a levee, and yes, Al is steering the boat. And so he passed his first test of sailing. And then in 80, he got a laser, and that began a real adventure in the world of sailing. One of the great things that happened in lasers is they maintained their popularity as people got older. Lots of classes lost their folks, and one of the reasons they did is because they invented an innovative formula for handicapping older sailors in lasers. And our presentation today by our two speakers is about this laser masters circuit and how it keeps great sailors in the game long after they would otherwise retire in golf or in other kinds of sports. And they've got a great presentation for us. So with that, please welcome Al Sargent and Chris Boome. Come on up, boys.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Thanks everybody for joining. How's my sound? Is it good?
Great.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to talk about laser master sailing, past, present, and future, and let's go ahead and dive in. So Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about this diagram and what this is?
Yes. So the laser class. Oh, right. Let me just get one thing. Sorry. So, in the beginning of the laser class, there was Bruce Kirby, the designer, Ian Bruce, who would become the builder, and this yellow piece of paper. This looks very much like today's lasers, because it is, and it was the sketch that Bruce Kirby made that would eventually become the laser. Ian Bruce wanted to build a small dinghy, and so they drew this boat up. They sailed it a little bit I think it was started drawing in 69, and in 70, they built a prototype in time for a regatta that the Yacht Racing magazine had at Lake Geneva at the Playboy Club, and it was called the America's Teacup. And they had a bunch of new dinghies, and they wanted to sail and see what people thought of them. And this boat was sailed the first time on the morning of that race. It was put together literally that morning for the very first time. And Hans Fogg, who was Olympic sailor, very good sailor, and ended up making the sails, got tied for first in the regatta. And at the time, when they first started it, Bruce Kirby had called it the Weekender, and Hans Folks found that such a terrible name that he just put TGIF on the sail. They did some modifications to the boat, position of the mast and everything, and sometime later they were getting ready for a display at the Mystic Seaport Museum in Connecticut. It was the first time, and somebody went up to Ian and says, "You got to give it a better name. The kids won't care about that." And Ian says, "What about laser?" And the guy said, "Yeah, that sounds good." So Ian went home and looked up in the dictionary what a laser was, and there was a symbol for it. Was the sunburst of the laser, which became the laser symbol, and they decided to have the laser. So they named it the laser. By the January of 2021, they had a early laser on display at the New York Boat Show, and they sold something like 500 of them right off the bat. Can you maybe show some of the? We were going to move along to show the. Okay, this is the boat that was sailed in the teacup with the TGIF, and I think the next one has actually the designer sailing. You have to remember what these words because I have no clue.
So this is Bruce Kirby.
This is Bruce Kirby racing. Looks like against some other lasers.
And what's amazing about, I just want to point out what's amazing about this is that the shape of the hull, this photo is from 1971. The shape of the hull looks, you're going to see photos from, a few days ago. The shape of the hull looks identical to what it was back then. So I think it's really a testament to just how great of a design it was. Lots has changed on the boat, but the core hull is the same as it was back in 1971.
Okay, so then what happened after the New York Boat Show? They were building. I don't remember the exact number, but they were kind of maxed out. The factory was in Montreal, Canada, and Ian had also had some experience in starboats. And Don Trask was down in Nassau racing his starboat that he'd built in basically in a garage in San Rafael. And Ian was inside the boat, and Don walked up and Ian introduced himself, and Ian said, "Hey, I've got this dinghy that I think you'd really like." He showed him some stuff, and he says, "Don, do you think your factory can build these?" As we know, there was no factory, and of course Don said, "Sure, no problem. This looks great." So they did all the paperwork and stuff, and fortunately Ian didn't come out to California first to check out the factory, and Don called Bill Chrysler to come up and help him run this company they were starting. They got the molds in. They started building lasers. And is that the one that has the one
yeah.
that?
So the thing about this I want to point out is this is an ad from 1972, 73. But if you look down there at the bottom, you see there's two factories. One's in Quebec, the other's in San Rafael, California, which was Don Trask's factory where he built a lot of lasers. And you can see that even in 1973 or so, 3,500 lasers had been built. So there was just this explosive growth really early on. 35,000, excuse me. Yeah, 35,000, which is an awesome number. So the boats got off to an incredibly fast start, and thanks in large part to Don Trask and Bill Chrysler's factory.
Yeah, one interesting thing is that Don and Bill built 11,000 lasers the time they had the factory. That is still, to this day, almost 5% of the total lasers ever built. There's a little over 220,000 lasers that have been built. So things were hopping there, and we had a nice party for Don in the regatta, and heard some stories about some fairly well-known sailors had got their start in lasers and really moved up their sailing career because of, quote, seconds. And guys like a guy named Paul Kayard, Commodore Heineken, Doug Holm, John Kostecki, John Bertrand, all those guys, Russ Silvestri, Bill Symes, who is in my age group now, multi-times world champion, all got their start from going to 33 Duffy Place in San Rafael and picking out a second. Sometimes it took a lot of looks to find a blemish on them.
Explain what a second is.
A second is supposed to be a boat with a flaw on it. And if you've ever seen any boat in the world, there's always a flaw. And so there was always a flaw that got these kids to buy the boats. I was actually a laser dealer at the time down on the peninsula. We had Peninsula Laser Sales, and I worked for Barriant Winches, and we would go next door to Mr. Mosley's other company, and he had a flatbed truck. I'd drive it up to 33 Duffy Place. I had to buy 6 boats at a time. They came in a big cardboard box. We'd take them back to my partner, Dave Vickland, rented a house with a big backyard. We'd put the boats out there, and we'd have all sorts of parties until the boats were sold, and everybody was always happy with their boat. So what's next?
So speaking of laser, Don Trask. So here's a little bit on Don Trask. So jump in if anything. So really accomplished sailor. Here he is early on. I'm not sure what regatta this is that he's winning, but and one of the cool things is that before he got into lasers, he was a really good starboat sailor. So here he is in the center photo, sail number 5700. To his right, almost capsizing, is the late great Tom Blackaller. And this is during the Olympic trials for this 1972 games held here in the Berkeley Circle, just behind me. Apparently in one of the races, the wind got up to 50 knots, and Tom sailed his starboat right into the water, just completely swamped it, almost sunk it, and so pretty crazy race. In the results, it was pretty amazing. I mean, this is, I think, a testament to Don's sailing ability. You see here in the trials, he finished 6th, but look at some of the people above him. Bill Buchan, who won the gold in 1984 in the starboat in the Los Angeles Games. Bill Buchan finished 2nd. Lowell North of North Sails, 3rd. Dennis Conner, of course, of the America's Cup fame, 4th. And Don Trask is right there, just ahead of Tom Blackaller. You can see he took a DNF in that last windy 50-knot race. So Don was a great sailor from the get-go, and so that really helped him a lot as he got into the laser class. So here he is with a parrot on his head and a laser in the background.
This was taken over in Marin County near McMears Beach, and we had a little regatta over there. We went a lot of places in the early days and just brought the boats and put the boats on the beach and went out sailing. My girlfriend at the time had a parrot, and she took this picture. So yeah, it's one of Don's favorites. And Don, this is about masters sailing. The masters age groups now start at age 30. In 1973, when the racing really got going in the laser, Don was 40. So he would have been getting master's points from us if master sailing was around in the 1970s. But it was going to come soon after that.
And so Don and the laser had a lot of great stuff. I think so.
Carl Van Dyne.
That's Carl Van Dyne. Is this Don or?
It's Don with the mustache and Carl Van Dyne, who was the Olympic fin sailor, sailing in front of St. Francis in a regatta in the early 70s.
And then we had, I guess this is Don. So lasers, of course, lasers are tippy boats. So here he is getting his boat back up quickly. And again, I guess with Carl Van Dyne. And is this Don as well?
I don't think that's Don. That's not Don, but it's during the first laser slalom.
Gotcha. And then another great thing. So speaking of the laser slalom, so the first one was held right here in St. Francis Yacht Club, 1974. The thing that makes the slalom really cool is it really was kind of a new discipline invented for the sport, where rather than doing a long upwind leg, maybe a reach, a downwind, back upwind, it's very, very tight. Each of these buoys that you see here are maybe 5 to 7 boat lengths apart. So it de-emphasized tactics, but it really heavily emphasized boat handling, your ability to tack and jibe well and do transitions between marks. And so it made for lots of capsizes. And so the very first one was the second one. So this is the guy in this picture is Chris Boome, my co-presenter here in the second one. And how did you do in the second one?
I won by a couple inches.
You won by a couple inches in the second one. Some of the other winners of the slalom include people like Jeff Madrigali, John Bertrand, Olympic medalist, Russ Silvestri. So very good company that you're in right there. And then
That's the first one.
this is in the first slalom, and so you can see that laser sailing can be a pretty crazy sport. This looks like some pretty high wind. Somebody lost their boom. The sail was reefed. Still capsized. So yeah, this is some pretty heavy carnage. But you know,
still looking for the sailor.
they're still looking for the sailor. But I think the great thing about the laser is that not only is it fast and easy to transport and all these great things, it's also a really durable hull. So I think it's really a testament to the quality of the design. So laser sailing had gone on. The boat had been invented. Been designed in 1969, 1970. Production started in 1971. And then by 1980, we started to get into, this is the dawn of master sailing. So you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, the first, we'll talk, there are some masters handicaps. So the 30-year-olds can race against the 80-year-olds, and the 80-year-olds still have a little bit of a chance. And in fact, in the regatta this weekend, the overall winner was 76 years old. The runner-up, who won all the races, was 39. And we'll talk about the handicap system later. But the first North American Masters Championships was just open to people that were over, I don't know, it was 35 or 40 at the time. There was no scoring adjustments or anything in that. And a guy named Randall Swan from South Carolina won. And Peter Seidenberg, who we'll talk about, who is just a laser master legend, multi-world championship winner, it was second. And then the next year, they had the Masters North American Championships again at Fort Worth Boat Club, and they did not use any master scoring for the actual regatta. So these finishes, Peter Seidenberg first, Dick Tillman, who was a fantastic fin, sunfish, laser, and fin sailor, went to the Pan Am Games, was second. And notice number 5, Jim Christopher. Jim Christopher is a legend here among laser sailors because when we were in he was probably 30 years older than me, and in 1981 he qualified for this regatta. He got 5th. He would go up to Huntington Lake, especially he was a real short, stocky guy. Do we have the photograph that I sent you last night? Yeah, you'll see him in a minute. And he looked like Popeye. He was so strong, and he was well in his 80s, and he would still go up at Huntington Lake and win races. And I think one regatta, he was going to win, but he got confused about the course and sailed the wrong course. But just a fantastic sailor and a great guy, and something that when we all met him for the first time, really looked up to him. Now in this regatta, they didn't use a master's handicap system for the actual scoring of the regatta, but they had a coveted green jacket that they gave to the winner on points. And what they did, it said the apprentice leader shall add 2 points to his score, the master's leader 1 point, and the grandmaster leader no points. Similar to what the program is now. So the winner in the where'd it go? No. I don't know who won the green jacket, but they also gave out Mr. Camp's prize for competitor who has traveled the greatest distance. We also, some of the regattas give an award out for the oldest competitor, and I'm happy to say that the oldest competitor this last weekend was our very own Commodore Heineken. He did a great job. And they gave a prize for who traveled the most, and I don't know how somebody got to Fort Worth without traveling further than Jim Christopher, but they did. But here in our regatta that came to St. Francis this weekend, we did have the district secretary from Florida, so he came a pretty long way. He was a little bit overmatched on the water, but he loved it. He's coming back, and everybody had a great time.
So why do we do laser sailing? Why do we get in these crazy boats? When most people are in much bigger boats or even motor boats. Well, I think there's one thing is that I've gone to a couple of Masters Worlds now, and it's really like a reunion of sorts where you're kind of getting together with a lot of old friends who you've met, or you get to sail against legends, people who've been in the Olympics. You feel like you're just part of this incredible group of sailors. They've known each other a long time. So the friends really are the true trophies of the sport, as Elvstrom mentioned years ago. Another reason is it's a great reason to stay fit. So who is this guy? This is Peter Hurley, who's one of the top master sailors in the world. And this is him back in 2015. He's a professional photographer, and so he documented himself in terms of going, from January to the end of July, and he got much more fit. And here we are in 2023. He's still keeping in good shape, and laser sailing is a great reason to do it. That's sort of on the more right brain level. On the left brain level, I'm a analytical guy. This is me from the Masters PCCs that we had a few days ago, and a few things. This is on my Apple Watch. I was tracking both the actual course I sailed through GPS as well as my heart rate. They have a heart rate monitor, and so one of the things I want to point out here: we sailed 15 points over almost 16 miles. So that's over a half marathon. Average heart rate 134 beats per minute. Max heart rate 170 beats per minute. So I should probably talk to my doctor about that because
He gets very hyper out there. But he hikes like that.
the harder you hike, the faster you go. And so you can see the heart rate there at the bottom. You can tell the upwind legs are the ones where the heart rate's going up. The downwind legs are the dips, basically. And you can see that's where we are right here in front of the city front. It was an early ebb, so we'd kind of come up the shore, play the shifts. But it really is a genuine workout. And the competitive juices, really, at least for me, I push much harder than I ever would in a gym or anything like that. So it's a great way to stay fit. And so why else? It's great racing. I mean, weigh in on any of this. But, one of the great things is that Bill Symes, who we'll see later, he's won the worlds many times. There were times where, I was tacking right on top of him. And a lot of boats, times people would complain if you tack on them. Bill's like, no, it's part of the sport. And people would tack on me. And it's like, no problem. This is part of the game. You're within the rules. And we all push each other hard. I think with Chris, I beat up on Chris all the time in our practices. He never complains.
Yeah, he tacks on me when we're practicing, so.
And he never complains because we know we're just pushing to be the best sailors we can be. It's also really inexpensive. I mean, when we come up with new gear and we kind of apologize for new carbon fiber masks that might cost $800, and people who sail keelboats are like, well, this is like my sailing budget divided by 10 for new sails. Great way to see the worlds. Our last world championships, we were in Thailand back in February. We were in Mexico a year before that. Ireland. Our next one's going to be in Australia. So it's a great way to see the world. You're constantly making new friends, and we can kid ourselves that we are quick. When we sail against the 20-year-olds, we realize that we're not fast, but in our own age group, we can feel pretty quick. So St. Francis has a long tradition of master sailors. Going back to the 2002 Worlds in Hyannis, Massachusetts, here are a number of St. Francis members. So from left to right, we have Peter Vasella on the far left. And then we have, Chris Boome right next to me. Is next, second from the left. Tracy Escher's in the center, Russ Silvestri, and then Brody Cobb. So these are all St. Francis sailors there. And then we look at the Masters Worlds. The first one was held in 1980, and France got 67 entries. We had the Worlds in San Francisco in 2011. We're going to talk a little bit about that more in a second. The biggest that I know of was in I can never pronounce that word, Ayers, okay. France in 2014, 500 lasers. Imagine that, 500 lasers. They wouldn't be all on the starting line at once. They'd break them up into different divisions, but just incredible. Imagine the scene on the beach and the boatyard for that. So in 2011, we had the Worlds here. And we had some great yacht club finishers. So if we look here, so things are broken up into age groups. So the masters are from age 45 to 54. And we had, let's see here.
Well, in the full
the
race,
same photo twice,
we had Russell Vestry got 4th.
Yep.
Tracy got 7th.
Yep.
Use the mic.
Oh, use the mic. Yeah, so we had Russell Vestry in 4th. We had Tracy Usher in 7th. And I cut these off because we had about 55 boats in the fleet here. But, again, some really amazing performances at the top of the fleet. These two tables are the same. I don't know. That was a little glitch in the production there, but we're not going to worry about it. There's Russ sailing in 2011. Again, getting to 4th place. This is another club member, Kurt Wessels, in probably the coolest sailing number ever, 1, followed by 5/8. So we're already up to 188,000 back in 2011. I can kind of go through some of these. So we had Fall Dinghy 2021 here in front of the club. So we're fast forwarding through the decades. One of the great things about the lasers is that the master, you have master sailors who are able to compete at a high level. So what we have here is my son, who at the time was, I think, 17 years old, sailing lasers all the time.
His son is behind, by the way.
Yeah, behind is the son. Ahead is this guy here who was at the tender young age of 74. So I don't know how many times that's 5x his age ahead. So I think the great thing about the laser is that with some skill, with practice, and you can actually finish ahead of the young whippersnappers. Back in last year, Monterey, we had the Monterey Club Championships. This is right after a big storm that came through, big weather system. They clocked the top winds, and I love it. The race committee, they didn't want to say it was 30 knots, so they said the top wind was 29.8 knots was what the top they measured. But it was insane. I mean, you're going through the waves, 6-foot waves. Your boat would go over the waves, slam down. You think you're going to break the boat. This is an example where, so we have Tracy Usher here in sail number 57, and then one of our, he's not a St. Francis member, but he's a fellow master, Toshi Takiyanagi, one of our local sailors here, and he's just getting swept over by this wave. And typical example of how it was. That's yours truly going up, and the waves are so big that your boat would go completely out. Also, a little subtle thing. I mean, look at the mast bend here. I just pulled the boom vang on as hard as I could, and the sail's basically inverted. You can see the 67410 that was put on properly, but because there's so much boom vang, it's fast, but the sail looks horrible. But you just have to flatten it out because there's so much wind. This is
head sticking out. Looks like a little sea otter there.
Yeah, it looks like a little sea otter. That's yours truly. So what happened was, the story behind this was there was so much wind that I had to dump my main sheet out. So between the side of the boat and the end of the boom was probably about this far, which is a lot on a small boat. And when I went in for the tack, I was lazy, probably tired, did not pull the main sheet in, and so the sail, the main sheet wrapped around the tiller, couldn't ease the main sheet out back when I attacked, so it capsized, and I had this very embarrassing photo. So I was not able to finish that race. Well, by the time I got my boat back up, everybody had already surfed down to the leeward mark, and so I was like, okay, I'll just go in.
But at least you did your 360 in a different way than the normal 360 after hitting a mark.
I think I did a 360 with my beer afterwards. So Masters World 2022 was in Mexico, in Puerto Vallarta, and we had this is sort of what a typical starting line looks like. This is in the last race, and one of the cool things I want to point out, I mean, this looks like a bunch of sails, but so one of the cool things is that this guy here is his name. He's the Olympic rep from I think 2012, 2016. He's from Greece. Literally, his name is Adonis. When he takes off his shirt, all the wives and girlfriends of all the sailors, their heads turn. They're like, "Oh my God!" And so he was, just this incredible, just incredibly fit sailor. He actually finished about in the top 50 in the open world. So not Masters Worlds, but open worlds. This gentleman right here is from Dubai. He was in the Olympics in 2008. And then the guy here winning the windward side is yours truly. So it's just some incredible sailors that you get to race against in this fleet. Incredible competition. Again, I guess patting myself on the back. Here's me and then here's Adonis. I have Adonis, who again Olympic rep. This is Orlando Gledhill, who finished third in the regatta, who Olympic rep from the UK. So the great thing about the Worlds is you get to sail against these amazing sailors, make a lot of great friends, and really just challenge yourself to see how well you can do. And then here are the St. Francis members. So this young man here next to me, Chris Boome, Peter Vasella, who finished second. That's why he's got his little cube and his trophy. Andrew Holdsworth, another member, Tracy Usher, and yours truly. So representing the club. And then again, here's Peter Vasella up on the podium, having gotten, actually he got third. Wolfgang Gertz, who got second, was a Finn world champion. And then this is Laurie Smith, who I think was an America's Cup skipper for the UK in one of the America's Cups. So the cool thing is you've got these illustrious sailors, and you're all out in these simple dinghies, same boats. It's incredible. It's kind of like playing the Masters Golf Championship, with Tiger Woods when he's 60 years old. So for me, it's just an incredible honor to be able to be out there. So this is in another age group. This is in the 75 plus age group. So the cool story here. So we have Boomer here on the top of the podium, winning the Masters Worlds last year. Second is Bill Symes, who is from up in Portland, Oregon, longtime sailor, great sailor. And we're going to talk a little bit more about him later. And another St. Francis Club member, John Andron. So the great thing about Andron is he can finish third, but he's still almost as tall as the first place finisher. We're getting close. Okay. So one of the cool things here I just want to talk about is Puerto Vallarta, super hot. And one thing is I was basically had sailed the week before these guys. So I was texting Boome all the time saying, you got to drink your water. You got to drink your water. You got to have your electrolytes. And you did, which is awesome as my training partner. And so when Bill had to basically drop out on one of the races and eat his throw out on this one, Chris got a third. And so what that meant was that while Bill was winning most of the races, you could see here, when Bill was over early, Chris was able to get a first place, and by 1 point win the world. So it's not always about the speed, on the water. Sometimes it's just about your nutrition and staying hydrated, and just doing the right thing there. So
basically, we were taught because Bill was over early the next to the last race. We were tied going in the last race. So even though he dropped out of a race because he didn't drink enough water, I still felt like we had a real regatta because it all came down to the last race. And it was a lot of fun, and very surprising though to win that.
Yeah. So anyway, so nutrition again, it speaks to the physicality of these boats. Masters Worlds in 2023, just last February, was in Thailand. So we have members Walt Spivak, myself, John Andron, Andrew Holdsworth, Mike Bishop, and then again, I really love this photo because it's the podium. Bill Symes won it this year. Andron was second. Chris wasn't able to make it. We had a gentleman from Japan. But the cool thing is it speaks to the international aspect of the class. The class is in 114 countries. We're probably, along with the Optimist class, probably the most international of sailing classes. So when you think of the sport of sailing reflected worldwide, it really does come down to the laser, because no other class is sailed across such a wide age spectrum and such a wide geographic spectrum. And I think also the camaraderie is great when you see amongst these sailors too. That's reflected in this photo. So last weekend we had the Masters PCCs. Again, Commodore Heineken looking good, sailing really well. I think it was absolutely awesome. You hadn't been in the boat for a few years, so I think it was great you got out there. Walt Spivak, a club member out there. Tracy Usher, Here's Boomer looking nice and flat and fast. In the laser, we say flat is fast. The flatter you keep your boat, the faster you go. Here's John Andron and Kurt Wessels. Again, Kurt's got that same boat that he had back in the 2011 Worlds. So the boats are pretty durable too, which is another great aspect of them. Here's me. I don't look like I'm hiking hard for some reason. I'm kind of always embarrassed by that. And then this is Alex Settles. He's the guy the furthest traveled. He's a professor out in Florida and university professor. Has a summer off, so he's able to join us. Got blown away by how cold it was. It's a lot colder and windier than Florida. And I want to just point this out because this is kind of and this looks like a lot of numbers and stuff, but I want to just point out a key trend here, which is that the fact that we had Bill Symes, who's 76, myself, so he won, myself in second at age 54, and then James Espy, whose wife Jenny Tulloch is a member here. He's the Olympic rep from Ireland, represented Ireland in the 2012 games, and he's 39 years old, and he finished third. And then we had Boomer here. Tracy Usher, excuse me, in fourth, and then Boomer. So Tracy was, I don't know, above 60, maybe 66, 67.
Unfortunate that Tracy is 10 years younger than me, so I don't have to ever see him in masters competitions in the same group.
Yeah, so the point is, somebody in their 70s, somebody in their 50s, somebody in their 30s, somebody in their 60s, somebody in their 50s in the top five. And I think this is really the brilliance of the masters level scoring. And we're going to talk about what that looks like in a moment. Wrap it up? Okay, we're going to wrap it up. So okay. So let's just talk about the scoring. And then, so looking ahead. All right. So you want to talk about this?
Sure. The master scoring, the current system is, for a long time, have been 35 to 44. They just let those young 30-year-olds into the bottom group. So it's 30 to 44 years. When they finish the race, they have to add 4 points to their score. Then the next group is 45 to 54. When they finish the race, they have to add 3. Then it goes to Grandmaster. They add 2, Great Grandmaster 1, and the old geezers like us, like me, we don't have to add any points. The problem is twofold. The 30 to 44 year gap is a lot of years when it's half the life of the 30-year-old, all of the same points category. And the other thing that's happening, and we didn't have time to talk about him too much at this, maybe we can mention it later with questions, but there's legends. There's a guy named Peter Seidenberg who's 85, and he just won a regatta on the East Coast. He has been dominating in the Legends group until last year when a bunch of us, Andron and Bill Symes and I we were the new kids on the block, and so we were able to move him down a little bit. But you think of the difference between 75 and 85. That's also a huge gap. There's not many 85-year-olds sailing, but there are some 80-year-olds. So the talk is to switch to the same categories that the Finn class uses, which is 30 to 39, just 10-year increments throughout all the age groups, and have a group for 80 plus. And you'll be amazed at how many. Ron Young could sail in the 80 plus group. So maybe it's time you get working out again and come on out. You don't want to spend too much time on the powerboat. So anyway, this proposed thing, I think it's a good thing, but we don't know if it's going to happen yet. But it just shows that the sailors are getting older and older, and it's because it's a good exercise, it's a fun thing to do, and they're just great people. It's amazing how you meet people 20, 30 years ago, and you're still meeting them in Cancun or France or Australia or wherever.
Yeah, and another great thing is if there's ever a tiebreaker, it defers to the older guys. So, for instance, James Espy this past weekend, he won every race. I got second every race. I'm older, so I beat the tiebreaker.
So, does anybody have questions about anything? Okay.
Do we want to talk about what's coming, or do we want to wrap it?
What's coming with what?
So we're having nationals in Alameda, in Alameda Community Sailing Center. James is going to show up, which is great. So we got some Olympic representation. That's sort of a typical view of Alameda. It's a little lighter and warmer than here in the city front.
And Paul, it's going to be light winds, flat, and warm in October.
Look at that. That's me on the left, rounding a leeward mark in a practice, and it's so light I have to heel my boat to leeward to make it head up. And then another great thing is the laser's still going strong in the Olympics. We've got Marseille in France here on the left in the 2024 games. And then this is a photo, you wouldn't really know, but it is a photo of Long Beach in the Olympic venue for 2028. So it's a great class. We're continuing to modernize it thanks to the efforts of the efforts of Tracy Usher, a club member who is the Laser Worldwide Class President. So there we go.
And the Laser is a double Olympic class, so it's both the men's and the women's single-handed boat, which is, it's been since, I think, Savannah for the men's and somewhat after that for the women. So it's there's three different rigs, so it's very, very compatible. So when your kids come out of Opties, they can go right into lasers.
All right. Q&A.
Wonderful. Holy moly. So in 1971, first question is, for this very, very popular boat, it used to be called Everyman's Boat for the early on because anybody could buy one. What was the cost of a laser in 71, and what's the cost of a laser now? And why a laser, just out of the box laser, not counting, I'm going to ask later about rigging it. Boomer was around in 71.
So in 71, you could buy a laser. I mean, they had a couple of pricing, but basically for $695 with a sail and all ready to go, no dolly. And now, if you want to buy a laser with the carbon spars and all the Gucci rigging and stuff, it's $10,000.
However, I bought my boat, which had sat in a garage for pretty much for 20 years. I bought it for $3,000, and it's plenty competitive.
So I had lasers in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and I remember I had about 6 of them. And I remember the price didn't really matter much in those days. I could buy a laser for $1,500, or I could buy a laser for, $1,000, and in the 80s they were very much the same. But I used to press them to see if they were stiff, if they were were giving up, if the hull was cushy inside. Talk about the difference in the hull from the 71 to now.
Well, I think that that's one of the amazing things. It's pretty much the same thing. I think my criteria was always, if I ever had a boat that leaked, I'd just sell it. But I have an old boat now. It's 191 something. I have no idea. I don't even know how I bought it used. Actually, yeah, I traded it. Anyway, it's a long story, but it's an old boat and it doesn't leak and it's just fine. And the mistakes I make are far more important than any difference in the boat. So, as Al says, there's one of our really, really good Northern California master sailors is Toshi. He sails an old green boat. It's number 111 something, 110,000, which is, 50%. And now they're over 220,000, and he does just fine. He doesn't show me any mercy.
So the great thing about a laser is it's so simple that if you do have a leaky boat, easy to fix. There are 37 holes in a laser. And so when I got my 20-year-old boat, I figured the caulking was old. Easy, remove everything, and within a couple hours, everything was freshly bedded down, with new caulking. So it's such a simple boat. It's easy to get it back up. For brand new boats, we have about 7 or 8 builders worldwide, incredibly tight tolerances. Again, Tracy Usher deserves a lot of the credit for making sure that all the new boats are built to very tight tolerances.
Why don't you mention about the Ilka laser thing?
Yeah, so what happened was, in brief, we used to have pretty much one builder for the entire world, and they had a monopoly, and so they didn't really take quality all that seriously. And so there were things like, for the Olympics, if you wanted to have 50 boats for the 50 countries competing in the Olympics, they would need to bring in 150 boats, 3x the number, and track them, track the weight, the mast rake, all the. in order to find, the 50 boats that were equal. And that was a huge problem, right? Because the International Olympic Committee, World Sailing were saying, look, we can't have this marquee sailing event with such a variable platform. It's supposed to be one boat, one design, So what happened was in the late 2010s, long story short, the class association said, okay, the original builder, Laser Performance, you can no longer build these boats. We're now going to have licensed builders that are regularly inspected and have a consistent supply chain, consistent supply of boats at a competitive price. And so now that's the situation we're in. The boats are built worldwide. We always have a steady stream and supply of boats. And so now for the Olympics, you might need a few backup boats, but that's it. So much better quality.
The laser is not called the laser anymore, I'm sorry to say. It's called an ILCA. What is that called for? What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's now called an ILCA, I-L-C-A, International Laser Class Association, which is short for ILCA Dinghy. And the reason is Laser Performance. They had the copyright, they had the trademark on the name laser and the starburst symbol. So, but that's all they had. They didn't have the molds. They didn't have anything else. So the laser class said, okay, we'll just start building the same boat, call it something different, don't infringe on the copyright. There's no legal issue. And that's what they went ahead and did. And so it was a creative solution.
So in the 70s, St. Francis Stag Cruise, an official event, changed racing for the dinghy competition from El Toros to lasers. Having raced in both classes in the Stag, it was lots of fun. And since that time, you've won it several times. I won it 5 times. And another person who's won that competition is Bruce Monroe. And Bruce has a question now. Bruce.
Well, I have 2 questions for Boomer. Who is he, and who is the oldest sailor in the laser class?
I don't know who the oldest sailor is, but the oldest phenomenal legend is a guy named Peter Seidenberg.
Okay, so I used to sail lasers in my younger days, but I never could jibe the boat without the main sheet hanging up on the corner of the boat in the middle of a jibe. How do you fix that?
Pulling the main sheet hard as you jibe, but go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, Al will tell you much more detail than I could ever tell you because he likes doing all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm not detail oriented at all. But yeah, as you go through the jibe, as the boom crosses through, I'll pull the main sheet from the block right in front of the boom, and that just kind of pulls the main sheet up right over the corner and keeps it from catching.
If you'd known that, you would have been amazingly dangerous. You were fast as it was, Bruce, in lasers.
I used to race against Ron in lasers during Stag Cruise at Tinsley, and we had some pretty good battles.
Wonderful times. So let's see. What is the annual budget cost if somebody wanted to competitively race these days with a laser?
Are we talking local only or travel?
Well, both. That's really good. Thank you for the added question. But so let's say your equipment cost these days, because when I sailed them, and Brewster and I were playing in them, and when you first were playing in them, we had all aluminum masts and aluminum gear. Now you got the carbon rig and so on. So what's the annual competitive budget once you got your boat together with your rig and all?
I'd say for local, maybe $1,000 or $2,000, and the reason is again, it's low cost. For sales, what we'll do, so a new sail will cost you about $750, maybe $800 with shipping and tax. But what we do is we buy a sail with maybe 7 days of use on it from an Olympic contender, and they'll sell it for half price. So they'll sell it for like $400, and it's a perfectly good sail. The masts now are made out of the top section, which would frequently break, is made out of carbon fiber. So we don't know how long they last because no one ever breaks them. I mean, they're now like several years old. As long as you keep them out of the sun, keep them out of the UV, you can abuse the heck out of them. So they're ridiculously strong. And then, you're talking, I mean, I buy a new main sheet every, so new main sheet's $30. I mean, you're talking about tiny costs. I mean, you'll probably spend more on bridge tolls than you will on a sail with these boats.
Describe the other rigging modifications. There's little small lines with higher purchase systems in the Vang and cool things like that.
Yeah, so back in the day, you'd have like the Boome Vang would have 3-to-1 purchase. The Cunningham would be 2-to-1. The Outhall would be 2-to-1. And so if you wanted to shift gears, as the wind picked up or dropped, it was really difficult. And now what we've done is we've made the Boome Vangs are 15-to-1 mechanical advantage. Every pound you puts on 15 pounds of pressure on the Boome Vang. The Outhall is 8-to-1. The Outhall is 6-to-1. The Cunningham is 8-to-1. And so what it means is you can shift gears much more easily. So when we're sailing here in the city front and the wind might go from, in 8 knots, I can just have a full sail and be hiking the boat flat. But when the wind picks up to 12 knots, I have to be pretty heavily depowered. So you're shifting gears the same way. So using the Boome Vang, we have some NAR sailors here in the audience. You pull on the Vang the same way that you might pull on a backstay on a keelboat or a NAR. It basically makes the boat a lot more tunable.
Bending the rig and flattening the sail.
Bending the rig, flattening the sail, precisely, yeah.
And so what's the international distribution of lasers around the world these days? What percent are domestic, what percent are international, and where else are they raced heavily?
So 60% in Europe, maybe 20%, maybe 20% in North America, and then the rest scattered between South America, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Japan. The first nationals I ever won was the Singapore National Laser Championship in 1977. So I went to Singapore on an overseas, work assignment, and I thought I wasn't going to sail for 3 years. It turns out I got hooked in with the local laser fleet, and they had 80 boats on the line. And then they take laser sailing so seriously. On their $5 bill, they have a picture of their Olympic rep in the laser. So I'd hop in a taxi with this big duffel bag and a big blade bag, and then, what are you doing? And they'd say, oh, I'm going to train with Ben Tan. They said, oh, Dr. Ben, he's their laser rep is a celebrity in the country. And then I'd go and I'd pay the $5 taxi fare with, a bill with a laser sailor on it. So it was really kind of cool. It's incredible how this class that got started in Canada, has really expanded, worldwide, and has really worked its way in all over the world.
Question by Lance Burke. Lance.
So first, everything you say rings so true. The last time I raced lasers, I'm proud to say I took second place. Second place was to Malcolm Page. It was at Stag Cruise. When you take second place to a multiple-time Olympian, you're
gold, exactly, gold medalist.
And so that was fantastic. My question, though, is about future of the laser, especially bringing youth into the boat. I hear a lot of chatter on the docks now as everyone is foiling. Either they're foiling on they're foiling on windsurfers, they're foiling in monohulls even, or catamarans, or what have you. And so I'm hearing chat about how the laser's a little bit stodgy for these kids that are, just so used to doing everything fast. So what are you guys going to do to continue keeping the master's program vibrant?
You want me to take that first? Sure. For me, I see, just getting kids on the water and doing something athletic and being in nature, in a marine environment, I think is a great thing regardless of the platform it's on. And so I'm less concerned whether that's a laser, an arrow, a moth, a wasp, a wing foil. The wing foil PCCs, they got 60 boats in the line. So there's a lot of energy in that, which I think is great. I think the lasers it's a great boat because if you want, it's horses for courses, I think, as the Aussies would say. Different kids want different things. If you want a more solid platform, a laser's great, right? Because it gives you that more solid platform of 14 feet long, And one of the great things about the laser is we have what we call the ILCA 4 rig, International Laser Class Association, and 4 square meters. And so it's ideally suited for a kid who's about 110 pounds to 130 pounds. So it's perfect when you just get out of, you're too big for an opti, but you're too small for the laser, what we call the radial or ILCA 6, or the standard, now called ILCA 7. So we give them that platform, which is great. But if they want to do wing foiling, that's great too. You gotta be comfortable on a little 4-foot board bobbing out in the middle of the bay. But I know my daughter, who she wasn't really keen on traditional boats. She got out in an ILCA. She got out, on a wing foil last summer and loved it. So it's, for me, I think maybe in 50 years there's going to be a discussion with, two old guys talking about master sailing in wing foils. So it's all sailing. So it's all good.
One of the things is about the laser that makes it, I think it's going to appeal to people for a long time, is that, like, the boat I sailed before the lasers were around was an OK Dinghy. And the OK Dinghy to me is a much more fun boat to sail. It's not a wing foil or anything like that. But if I want to go to the OK Dinghy World Championships, I have to go take my boat, ship my boat, if I was really serious, my boat, my spar, and all that stuff. And or at least the spar, I raced in 1967 in Australia, and I was sailing. I sent my mast over there, and I was lucky enough to get a good boat to race with it. But the laser, when I go to a laser regatta, I'm getting a newer, better boat than the one I sail at home, and so there's no excuses there for sure. But you can go anywhere in the world, and so you go to Europe, you're going to be sailing against a fleet of 100 boats, and that's the 100 people you get to meet. It's very simple. There's no worry about gear. There's no tuning the rig. There's none of that stuff. It's basically, you have to tune your body up a little bit. Before we run out of time, I'd just like to say, since we're here at St. Francis, I'd like to give you a little rundown on the sailors from St. Francis who have excelled in the Masters World Championships. They publish a manual that shows the top 5 finishers in each class in each World Championships going back to 1980, I think or whatever, when it started. In the Yacht Club, the person with the most top 5 finishes is Peter Vasella with 6. He's got some thirds and some seconds. The next is Tracy Usher, has 4. He's got some seconds. And interestingly enough, when Tracy and Christy, his wife, went over to Australia, I don't have the year written down here, but Christy also got 5th in the women's group. So he got 2nd in his group in the men's, and she got 5th in the women's. That was pretty cool. Andrew Holdsworth, relatively new laser sailor, but he's also got 4 top 5 finishes. His best is 3rd in this year, I think. John Andron has 3 top 5 finishes. He's got seconds and thirds, and I think maybe a 4th or something. Chris Rabb, member from Newport Harbor, has 3 top 5 finishes, including his highest was a 2nd. Jacques Caresse, I don't know if Jacques is still a member, but he came out here 10 years ago or something like that, and he was abysmal in the laser. He's one of those guys who are always watching to make sure he was not going to tip over and giving him pointers all the time about his vang and his outhaul and everything. And he, in the last 3 years, he's retired. He sails all the time. He's from France. He has a French coach. He goes all these places and he trains, and he's gotten really, really good. He has 3 medals, including 2nd in class in 2021. Walt Spivak has 2 top 5 finishes, including a 3rd in 2022. Brody Cobb has 1, which was a 1st in his class. Some guy named Chris Boome has 1, which was a 1st in his class. John Bertrand has 1, which is a 3rd. Russ Silvestri has 1, which is a 4th. Al Sargent has 1. He's young. He was 5th, but he'll move up for sure. He's just too fast. I would like to mention one of our Northern California sailors. It's a great guy. He's from Australia, and he has to go back to Australia every 6 months, or he would have been here this last weekend. He told me, I really would love to sail, but if I don't go back, they won't let me back in the country. And he's probably he's certainly in his 80s now, and he has he got a third one time in his age group. And when I was doing this stuff checking the St. Francis members who got what, I noticed a guy named Keith Wilkins. Keith Wilkins is an English guy who's won about 6 or 8 times, been in the top 5 11 times. And about 2 years ago, he actually helped me out, because when I first started sailing lasers, I went to the first Laser Worlds in Bermuda, and I was 3rd. And then the next one they had 2 years later, I was working for Variant Winches, and I didn't sail lasers hardly at all, but I came out to the circle and qualified for the next ones, and they were in Kiel. And I have never sailed in a regatta that I was in so much pain and did so much worse. I went down to 30th, and for 40 years I was kicking myself about not being ready and how bad I got in 2 years and everything, until one day I was looking up some stuff for Tracy Usher for the class, and I ran across the results from Kiel, Germany. And I beat the 11-time medal winner in the Laser Master Worlds, Keith Wilkins, by 1 point in that regatta. So all of my guilt of 40 years was finally lifted. So the master sailing really helped me on that one.
Wild jibes. How many times have you flipped your boat in a regatta that you finished?
So probably the worst one was my very first Elvstrom. I think I was 14 years old. It was out here in the city front. And I was sailing a full rig, an Ilka 7. I weighed 135 pounds. And the weekend before, I'd crewed with a guy named Bruce Easom. For those of you who know Scott Easom, or Hank Easom. Yeah, Scott Easom's dad, Hank Easom's brother. And so what they would do, and they were on a Cal 29, and so what they would do is to jibe the boat, they would pull the main sheet in all the way, jibe it, and then ease the main sheet out. And of course that works great when you're on a heavy Bill Lapworth design with huge lead keel, but I thought, that's how you jibe a laser. So I would pull my main sheet in all the way, jibe it, and then boom, flipped. So I must have flipped 30 or 40 times, and I think the rescue boat they were just like keeping an eye on, probably just putting their face palming the whole way down. So yeah, that's the most I've ever capsized.
Give me a wild story, Chris. Could you beat that 30 times?
Well, no, I've never done that. You're ahead of me on that game. I actually, I think a little conservative sometimes. I don't tip over very much on a jibe. I'll tip over more getting my life jacket caught on a tack or wrapping the main sheet around the tiller or something like that. I think mainly because I don't right the boat as well as I used to. When we were getting ready for the Don Trask thing, there was a video of the second slalom, and I was going on. I did a bunch of jives that looked really good, and then I tipped over, and I was shocked. I didn't even know who that person was. He got up and got the boat right up again, and now if I tip over, it's like you can go have lunch while I get the boat up again. So I try not to do that.
Wetsuits.
Oh, I had, because I was working for Bering, and I sailed a lot in the very beginning of the lasers, and I had like a 25 year gap in sailing, and then came back. And the biggest difference in the boats was the boom vang. You can pull the boom vang all the way tight and let the sail out. And the clothes. I mean, we used to wear blue jeans and sweatshirts and a life jacket that was too big for anybody. And now we have the clothes. You're warm. I can go out whatever day we have in San Francisco. I can be warm going out without a problem, and it's just wonderful. If the legs would be fixed as well as the clothes, it'd be wonderful. But sometimes you can't walk downstairs after a hard regatta. But the clothes are fantastic.
So one of the greatest innovations is we have these things called hiking pants. So it's basically a wetsuit, but with sort of heavy battens sewn into the back. So the rail, when you're hiking out hard, leaning over the side, it doesn't press into the back of your leg. It's just nicely distributed. So that's really cool. The innovations, like Chris said, we've got titanium lined long underwear that you wear under your regular wetsuits. So we'll go out and we'll practice year round. We'll go out, we'll sail in the middle of January. It'll be 50 degrees out, and the clothing's phenomenal. I mean, if anything, you can overdress these days.
So kids, I remember, started wrapping the sails around the mast to reef them a long time ago. And nowadays we have smaller lasers. Give us a summary now of how many kind of laser sizes we now have. Ilka sizes.
Yeah, so we have 4 sizes now. We have the Ilka 4 for a 4 square meter sail, Ilka 6 square meters, Ilka 7 square meters. The Ilka 4 is really popular, like I mentioned, amongst people who are just getting out of the opties and into getting into a single-handed boat. The great thing about it is when you get out of so the opties pretty much supplanted the El Toro. It's like an El Toro, but it's sailed pretty much worldwide. And when you go out of the opti, when you get the max weight for an opti is maybe 100, 105 pounds. When you get too big for that as a kid, you can either go into a 420 for double-handed or for a single-handed, so laser. So if you want to do the single-handed route, the Ilka 4 is a great choice for you. And then once you get to be about 125, 130 pounds, it makes sense to go into the radial, or I could say radial, Ilka 6. And then if you get to be about 155, 160, you should start considering the Ilka 7 or standard rig. That was the first laser rig. And if it's windier, like, I'm 185, I sailed an Ilka 6 on the city front because it's windy. So you can modulate that a little bit based on the wind conditions. But those are the 3 rigs that we use. And the great thing is, you can be anywhere from 100. You can be a little kid who's 12 years old, or someone who's 200 pounds. We have a guy, a pro sailor named Rodney Daniel, who's done a lot of America's campaigns. He's about 210, 220, but he'll go out in an Ilka 7 rig and do just fine in 6 knots. So it's a really cool thing. In the rigs, you can go ranging. You can range from 110 to 220 with the same boat.
Women in lasers. What's the percentage of overall sailing by men and women?
So in the Olympics, we have an Olympic class so there's a women's Olympics in the Ilka 6 rig, and we have a men's class in the Ilka 7 rig. And, both those have the same number of countries represented, something like about 45 to 50 sailors. And, the great thing is that we have, we have a lot of women sailing. A lot of the teenagers sail in the youth champs, for instance. So, for instance, the youth champs back last year, 2022, out of San Diego, is won by a young lady named Catherine Doble overall, which I think she might have been the first time winning the youth champs single-handed. So, yeah, we have a lot of women sailing, and again, it's because we have different types of rigs.
Guess the percentage overall. What percent do women represent?
Probably in in the master sailing, not a lot. There's this one
5%,
Australian.
10%?
I'd say probably about 5% in the masters level. And then but then from like the teenage to 25, 30-year-old level, it's probably about 45 to 55, 45% women, something like that.
Great. Well, Chris Boome, world champion, Al Sargent, great Masters laser sailor. Thanks so much for sharing your stories with the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Absolute good job. Terrific. Thanks, guys.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.